Welcome to Fraud Friday. I'm Bob Coleman, and we're talking loan fraud, bankers, public officials, and borrowers, and New York police detectives who got caught. Delaney, Sexton, Lance Sexton. Delaney, wild story. What do we got out of New York?
It is. And for any of you guys who know me, I study criminal justice and criminology, and I can tell you they don't have to put it in the textbooks to tell you not to commit crimes allegedly. But that does
not to do a conspiracy where you're being recorded. Allegedly. Go ahead, Delaney.
Absolutely. So this week we had an indictment come out accusing John Bolden, an NYPD detective, Anthony Carrera, an NYPD detective, which has since retired, and then Jacqueline Johnson and Christian McKenzie, who were both John Bolden's mother and cousin. They claimed all of these people were in a conspiracy to commit PPP fraud. And now there's one more individual, and they were not named, so we don't have any more information about them. But they're a pretty crucial person, so I imagine we'll hear more in the future. And as a little summary, the government's saying they helped 65 individuals obtain PPP funds that they were not entitled to. They were preparing fictitious IRS Form Schedule C documents, and they were selecting amounts that would allow his clients to apply for forgiveness without having to submit documentation to support those fraudulent figures and forms.
Yeah.
So to take it back from the start, this all kicked off in the beginning of May. John Bolden received an email from co-conspirator 1, and this email contained a 30-minute recording of a meeting between the co-conspirator and other tax preparers talking about how to prepare fraudulent PPP loan applications. And so it was recommended that these loans were all less than $20,000 to avoid submitting proof. And as a quote from the recording, "We all want the bread, but we also want the loan forgiveness. That's the big win."
Yeah, the thing that has happened in PPP fraud as we go forward is that was a thought process by these people that are committing fraud on these smaller PPP loans is we don't have to provide anything for the forgiveness. And if they use a direct forgiveness form, it's just a few questions and that they've submitted. But what's happening as we continue to walk through this is the SBA is coming back, and anybody who did PPP lending knows the information request from SBA. And they are asking for extensive amounts of information about these small $20,000 and $10,000 PPP loans. So some of their plan didn't work out exactly the way they thought it did.
Absolutely. And you've talked about many times there being like a round table of people talking about how to commit PPP fraud. Now, I don't know if they were all at a conference table or in a conference room, but it kind of seems like it has that vibe to it. So this co-conspirator was telling them how to even compute the figures for the Schedule C, take the desired loan amount, divide the figure by 2.5, and then multiply by 12 to generate a fictitious figure for net profit. And there's quite a few quotations here. I'm going to have to go a little slow so that I don't accidentally slip something because there's quite a few not so nice words. So they were suggesting to stagger the numbers a little bit, get creative. If you're going to do some fake stuff, do plumbing, trucking, you know what I'm saying, something like that. When you're coming up with business names, devise some full name for the business, such as Mickey House of Toys.
I like that one. That one.
And then they were very aware that they weren't supposed to be doing this. They said, "Now I would suggest to y'all, Mother blank trying to send me to jail for this paper because all y'all's up here on my IP address, but I couldn't figure out a better way to use it." They didn't want any of their involvement to be recorded in this scheme, despite having recorded the 30-minute meeting. Not really sure how that one works. But I'll take all my money in cash, no quick pays on this.
It's kind of interesting how they were directing them on preparation of a fictitious Schedule C. Because when PPP got into 2021 and we had all these sole proprietors and independent contractors, some of the people I talked to would have a Schedule C with not a lot of information, and then I'd Google search them and figure out that they actually did have a business, but it's not a robust tax return like a normal LLC or S Corp or C Corp. It's some revenue and typically a couple of expenses, so they're pretty simplified Schedule Cs that were submitted with these.
In Delaney, this was a conspiracy. 65 transactions. I love this quote. So let's say you got someone, give them 20 grand and taxing them 3,000, which means the conspirators, John and Christian and mom and cousins, they tax them 3 grand. That goes in my pocket. So they get 17 in their pocket, and they're walking away with 13 grand free of charge because of the loan forgiveness. And they knew what they were doing, Delaney.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. And of course, I'll repeat this, they're all allegations, but you can see that was repeated even with Anthony Carrera, Jacqueline, and then Christian. They all would get approved for these PPP loans with these purportedly false Schedule Cs, IRS Form 1040s. And then you would see that almost immediately after being approved, they would pull $3,000 or $4,000 from their account, and they'd either pull it in cash, so then technically we don't know where it went afterwards, or in one case, they even Zelled John $4,000 immediately after.
Lance, we've talked about this. Both these gentlemen were current New York police detectives. They were earning at the time over $100,000 in wages, but they showed on their 2019 tax returns, they only earned $5,866. This is John Bolden. And the rest, and then he earned, he had a security firm where he earned $129,583 with a profit of $99,764. Lance, in your experience, when someone gives you a Schedule C and they have gross revenues of $129,583, how many times do you see the majority of that being shown as net profit without any write-offs?
Well, and that's the thing about a legitimate Schedule C, Bob. I mean, I file a Schedule C with my tax return every year, and I'm going to find any legitimate expense to write off. So I'll have numerous expense categories on that Schedule C. And,
legitimate.
And I had this conversation with an Uber driver on the way to the airport yesterday. They had gotten a PPP loan, and, they had been reading about these fraud stories. And there are people out there that, hear this show, maybe hear something that they've read in the newspaper that are afraid. People that got legitimate PPP loans. And I was able to talk this Uber driver into
talk him down off the ledge.
They're going to be fine. Yeah. But they were worried about, the SBA, the Department of Treasury, Department of Justice coming after them. And I said, no, the way you've described this, you had a legitimate PPP loan that should have been forgiven. But what I'm seeing a lot of in these investigations is they are certainly going after these fraud rings, the multiple player opportunities, which makes sense because instead of having, John Bolden by himself, you've got 65 people here.
Yeah. And you talk about two characters right out of Central Casting. Those are the two gentlemen I would not want to be on the other side of an interrogation table. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah. And
they know what they're doing.
But the other thing, guys, the conversation with the Uber driver on the way to the Atlanta airport, they shared with me, had they not gotten a PPP loan, their revenue stream had cut 75% because nobody was going anywhere during the pandemic. And, she clearly indicated that had she not gotten a PPP loan, she wouldn't have made it. So she would
have lost her transportation. It would have been repossessed. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the stories, we hear a lot of these fraud stories, but we also have to remember there were millions of Americans that got help when they needed help.
But for greed to take over, these two gentlemen, great careers, a lot of money to do this for, and they individually got their own PPP loans as well. to do that type of fraud is inexcusable, allegedly. And what we've seen down in Broward County, the prosecutors and the courts take a dim view of law enforcement professionals who abuse the system. Delaney, great reporting. Thank you very much. Lance, good to see you. As always, thank you for joining us today for Fraud Fridays. You can stop criminals from stealing from your bank.
Have a good weekend.
Good weekend, everybody.
Bye-bye.